whenever you're ready, go ahead and talk to each other.
All right. Well, so we were talking about this idea of starting with the problem rather than kind of trying to figure out what to do first. So that's what this approach will do, is we'll help you see, you start with this problem you're seeing, and then you think about how you might reframe that. So let me give it an example. Sometimes, unfortunately, when teachers are new to UDL, they often see the problem in their classroom, but they go straight to, well, this is a student, like the student is doing this, or the student is not doing this. But we talk about a lot in UDL that the problem is not with the person, not with the learner or the student, but often with the design itself. So what happens is that sometimes they'll name the problem, and then they blame the student, and then they just kind of stop there. And don't really look at solving the problem in the classroom. Rather, they're just blaming it on the student and being like, oh, well, I don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. So what this does is it helps us to kind of get past that stopping point of, oh, the problem's with the student, and look at the pieces of our design that might actually be. So we're going to reframe, and then we're going to move on to, this is kind of cheesy, but taming and then claiming the problem.
Yes.
So let me walk through what that looks like. Oh, there's the book. So often when I hear teachers first talk about a problem of practice that they're seeing in their class, they will say something often like these things. Or this might be something that teachers would say to themselves like at lunch or something, right? Like they go to meet each other at lunch. Oh, how's it going today? Oh, they won't stop talking. Oh my God, they will not stop talking in my class. Or they might say, man, these students just don't know how to study. Like they just are not whatever. And so the subject of that sentence being the students. And so that essentially is an educator saying, hey, the problem's with the student. So I'm gonna just take you through one example all the way through.
Yes.
So for this example, a teacher might be saying, they keep forgetting to bring their materials to class, and this is a middle school example, 6th graders, which is pretty common. They keep forgetting to bring their materials to class, things like notebook, binder, etc. So that's the problem that this teacher keeps seeing. So what we're going to do then is we're going to try to reframe that to where the problem might be in part of the design as opposed to it being a student issue. And one of the key things we talk about in UDL a lot is that the problem is not in the person, it's in the design or the environment. So we're going to take that sentence that we had a minute ago, they keep forgetting to bring their materials to class, and we're going to remove the students as the they, and then we're going to replace it with the design of some kind. So it might be the design of the lesson doesn't provide for, or the location of the materials isn't. Because really, in the end, if you think about it, like I don't actually have a whole lot of control over what students do or don't do in my class. They could literally stand up and walk out. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I can't make them stop. But there are lots of things I do have control over. Where the things are in the classroom, what order I'm doing activities in, like whether I'm doing something that's active or passive or whatever. Like I have a lot of things I do control in the classroom. The students are not one. So I want to get myself to a part that I can change, actually. So basically we take out the students from the whole thing. They keep forgetting to bring their materials to class. And then we're going to replace that with something like the design. So here we'll do a couple examples where we'll just practice together. So for one example, if Braden could read better, he would do much better in social studies class. So if we take out Braden, and we think about the problem might be with the design, any ideas what that might be? I mean, there's no right or wrong answer.
Right. It could be something like the lesson activity did not provide explicit directions. For the social studies reading in class, or the lesson activity wasn't developmentally appropriate for Braden.
Okay. No, those are pretty spot on. So this is just my interpretation. So the design of the social studies class only provides students with one option. All they got is a textbook. That's all they get. And so if Braden, let's say Braden is dyslexic, that's not going to work real well for Braden. So the problem there is that the teacher only provided one option, a paper textbook. Let's try this one. This is one I get a lot. Yes. These students just don't care about algebra. So any ideas what that might be about?
It could be something around the design of the lesson does not promote student engagement or student interest.
Yeah, that's not pretty close to what I had. So the learning activities don't highlight the connections between the things they're learning about and things they actually care about already.
Yes.
Because that's the thing I can change. I can change the design. I can give students a paper book and an audio version, or I can make sure that they're understanding that the things you're learning about are actually applicable to you in these ways. I can't make Braden read better, and I can't make students care about algebra, but I can do these things. So we're really it helps us kind of focus in on what we actually have the power to change. So we'll take our original problem. They keep forgetting to bring their materials to class. And this is just how I've reframed it. The design doesn't have built-in supports to help with things that we know middle schoolers are not great at, like pre-planning, organization, time management. So that's how I'm going to reframe the problem. So if I'm writing this on the form or in the template, this is what I originally thought of. They keep forgetting to bring their materials to class, and then I've reframed it as what we just said. The design doesn't have any built-in supports to help with things like pre-planning, organization, time management. So we're shifting that whole thing, which is kind of the whole idea behind UDL in the first place, is kind of reframing. So now that we've done that, now we're going to take it to the actual framework of UDL itself. And so if the problem is that the design doesn't have built-in supports to help with pre-planning, organization, time management, what I have people do next is to just look at the name of each of these guidelines. And so each color-coded box is called a guideline. However, this is a little overwhelming, so I often have people just look at this side. It just only says the name of the guideline. So I'm going to think through each of these guidelines and the problem that we've reframed. And I'm saying, like, which of these is it most closely related to? So here's kind of the same thing. And I'm going to think through one at a time. I'm going to squish them down here to the bottom. So here they are down here at the bottom. So I'm going to think, okay, the design doesn't have supports for pre-planning, organization, time management. I don't think that's about welcoming interests and identities. That's not really about perception. And I'm just thinking through one at a time, right? Is it this thing? I don't think so. And I just keep going until I get down here to this bottom row, and I'm like, well, it could be emotional capacity. I don't think it's building knowledge, but I think it's strategy development. They don't have the strategies to think to themselves, oh, I'm going to sixth period, I should bring this thing. So now that we've focused in on one of the guidelines, then we can ignore everything else and just look at that one piece, which is really helpful. Again, this is really overwhelming. This was overwhelming to me when I first looked at it. So it can be a little off-putting. So in this strategy, we're just going to focus on one thing. So you don't have to know all of the things. We're just looking at this one. Then we're going to try and figure out, if you're still using your form, you could check box like there. That's what it is. It's this one. So this is where we get into the actual guideline itself. And so if the problem I'm seeing in my class has to do with the strategy development, if that's the problem, then the little bullet points, which we now call considerations, the considerations underneath are the potential solutions for that problem. So let me say that one more time because I think that's super important. Okay, so if the problem we're seeing is this with strategy development, then the potential solutions to that problem are those bullet point areas below. So it could be any one of these things that might help. So that kind of goes back to our idea of the troubleshooting guide, right? Like, here's the problem. It could be any one of these things. So that's kind of how that one works. And then I've got a couple built-in prompts in here just to, like, it's probably a good idea to check in with the students and say, hey, friends, remember how you keep forgetting to bring your stuff every time you come to sixth period? It sounds to me like you need some kind of a reminder, like before you walk in the door, to remind you, oh, I got to go to my locker and grab my whatever. Is that what the problem is? What do you all think? And they'll tell you. And so I've asked them in this pretend scenario that we're using, and they have said, oh, yep, they keep forgetting which things they're supposed to bring on which days and which materials for which classes, which again is pretty common for a lot of sixth graders, because they're moving from that model of being in the same classroom all day long to, like, now we're going to different classes. So I've asked them, that sounds about like what we talked about. So, I skipped a little part in here. Oops, let me go back. So once we've narrowed it down to that one guideline, now we're going to see if one of these bullet points makes more sense than others. for solving the problem that we're seeing. And so it looks like they're having a hard time organizing information and resources. So that might be something I can help. That might be something I can help to support them with myself. So I've asked the students. Hang on. And then after we've kind of figured out what the problem is, then we're going to say, all right, well, I mean, I have a lot of strategies. I'm a teacher, so like there's lots of things I've tried. Do I have any current strategies that might work well for solving this problem of them needing some help with organizing materials and such? And so I'd come up with a couple things, a couple ideas I had, which were taking points away when they don't bring the materials. Well, I've tried it. That's not working real well. I could also give bonus points for bringing materials, but it ends up just being you're giving bonus points to the same students, and it's not solving the problem for the students that forget things. So that neither of those has worked really well. So maybe I need to try to find some new strategies. So I do a little brainstorming. There's a CAST website that has the guidelines on it. It's a great website, and it's got. I'll show you real quick. So if you scroll down, then it's got the whole same framework, but these are all interactive. So I can click on this one that says Organize Information and Resources, because that's the one we've been talking about, and it gives you a few kind of overarching ideas or strategies of things that might help for that.
Yes.
So here it says you can use graphic organizers or templates, you can use prompts, maybe checklists, guides for note taking. And so as I've read through those, that kind of gets my teacher brain thinking about what might work for this group. So just to come up with some new ideas, I thought about a BYO list, bring your own things. So like outside of my class, I can have a paper I post every day. It says first period, bring textbook. Second period, make sure you have your binder and pencil. Third period, or whatever, so that they can walk by and see that and then go, oh shoot, I need to remember to go get that from my locker. I also thought about getting an actual like real stop sign somewhere and putting it by my door with a thing that says stop, do I have my materials? So it's kind of visually cueing students before they come in without their materials, and then they go, oh shoot, and then they run to their locker and they get their stuff. So those are things I can do. So I'm going to try one of those out and see if it works. And then I'll probably come back and ask students if that's helping. So last week we talked about how we kept forgetting to bring our stuff to class. This week I put the giant stop sign up. It seems like that's been helping. It's not as many people have forgotten their stuff. How's that going for everybody? So I'm just going to ask them what they think. And I just kind of jot down what their thoughts are. So they said they liked having the visual BYO list in the hall because it reminds them to plan ahead and get the stuff they need. And then they said something about they wish their other teachers would also do that so that they would remember. So that was really long, but it kind of systematically breaks down how you might use this actually to plan things in your classroom. So that's the second approach, is this troubleshooting approach. I want to stop. Questions, comments, thoughts, ideas?
I think this is a really mindful approach and reflective approach, and use of universal design, and it also empowers students because they sort of see the process and understand the maybe like pro-social skills and other skills that we're building, and sort of tapping into executive functioning skills as well, with particular reference to this example.
Well, I think it also gives them a little bit of like responsibility, right? Like they realize that them not bringing things to class is kind of derailing what you want to do in class. So it kind of forces them to think about that.
Yes.
So the last one is this journey mapping approach. Have you ever done any kind of journey mapping or anything like that? Some people haven't, and some people have not.
No.
Okay, so a journey map, a journey map is, actually, move this one. It's a visual depiction of some kind of a process. And so we'll see a lot of companies put together a journey map to think through a process. So like Amazon, for example. Amazon might think to themselves, okay, it seems like we're losing a lot of customers between when they think to themselves, I really need to buy a new iron for my house, and when that iron arrives at their home in a nice Amazon box. So like we lose them somewhere. Where are we losing them in this process?
Mm-hmm.
Is it at the beginning when they're searching on the website? Is it once they've found a product and they're trying to figure, which part of the process is it? So we can actually use that same process to talk through a lesson. So this is an example of a journey map. This one's a little overwhelming, but it is what it is.
Love it.
And so it's tracking a few things. So I'll just point out a couple. Up here along the top, it's pointing out what the customer's feeling at that particular time. So the first one says, customer's nervous about utility controlling AC during a summer. So this is like a thermostat that you might get from your energy company that would help control the temperature or whatever. It's some kind of free program that they have. And so the first part, they're thinking about the customer being nervous. Then when they get over here, they're saying, well, the customer doesn't, they get the thermostat, but they don't do anything with it, like it just sits in the box of their house. So they're kind of tracking what the customer's feeling. Then they're also tracking along here the customer level, like how satisfied the customer is. That's, I think, in the greenish. And then the grayish, they're tracking how much communication is coming from them at that moment to see if those things align somehow. And it kind of looks like they might. And then down at the bottom, they have questions that they think a customer might be using. So this whole process is just thinking through the mind of a customer, kind of like how do each of these steps work if I'm a customer? And so here's another example. This one is super tiny and hard to read, but it's booking car maintenance online. So like you're going to book it online and then you'll go do the thing. So they're tracking some of the same things. So up here they have what the customer's thinking, and this one also includes the questions that they might be asking. So how much is this going to cost? I can't read that because I'm really old now. Are they flexible, or can I just show up? So it's just questions that they might be thinking. They're actually using words down here to describe what the feeling is of each of the customers, but they've also used little emojis to represent what they might be feeling at that moment. And then at this part, they're talking about what are some of the things that the customer's experiencing, and then down here, where are the opportunities we might have to fix or maybe make that a little bit better or easier for the customer. So again, we can do that same thing with the teaching process as well. So we do something called a journey map. So I'm going to talk through this example real quick. But then on the other side, there's a math example, middle school math example we can talk about. And then on the inside, this makes me really happy.
Wow.
So I don't think I have any, but the tiny, tiny sticky notes, the little tiny Post-it notes,
Yes,
they
that you
fit
can-
in there perfectly.
Oh, that's awesome. I have some.
It makes me so happy. Okay.
I have, yes.
So I'll walk through this one real quick, and I think you'll kind of grasp how it works pretty quickly. It's not super difficult. So essentially, we're going to think about this second grade math, or music rather, a second grade music example from a second grade music class, to see if we can figure out what it's like to experience that from a student point of view. So the first thing that we do is we just sort of break down the lesson into some big chunks. Like, this is not detailed necessarily. This is like, first they come in and we do this thing, then we're going to do this thing, then we do this thing. So those are broken into pretty small pieces. So first is kind of an intro of where I'm greeting students, talking about what we're going to be doing. We're going to watch a quick video. Then we're going to talk about dynamic markings, and in music that's how loud or soft the thing is that you're playing. Then we're going to do some flashcards with dynamics, so they can hold one up and be like, that's forte or whatever. Then we're going to sing some songs, and I'm going to hold up cards that have different dynamics markings on them, and the students have to sing at the loud or softness level of that dynamic marking, which they love. And then we're going to finish up with a worksheet so I can see what everybody learned. So that's kind of the plan. This is my original plan. So now I'm going to think through each of these things kind of one at a time. So I'm going to think about, for each of these big chunks, what are the materials I'm going to need, or maybe what are the materials students might need. So I don't need anything for the first one. For the second one, you can see I've just got video, links, speakers, etc. For the flashcards, obviously we need flashcards for that one, and then worksheets and whatever. So you're just kind of filling in what are the pieces. So let me catch myself up here. So for the next part, I usually like to think through this, and I use the dotted line across the middle to be the baseline. Like, that's kind of, they They don't hate everything. They also don't love everything. They're just sort of about everything. That's what the middle line is. So I'm going to think about for each one of these steps, like where do I feel like students' emotions are? Are they below kind of meh, meaning that they're not enjoying it? Or are they like really enjoying it, which might be a higher mark, kind of up here like this? And I'm just guessing. This is just me guessing based on my teaching experience with these second graders so far. And so I put that one here. The video, I know I've had them watch this video before and I know they don't love this video, but it's the only one I can find. So I'm gonna put that one a little bit underneath so they don't really like it a whole lot. And then we get over here where they're doing the singing and I'm holding up the cards and they get to sing really loud or really soft and they love that. So I've got them pretty high up here. They're enjoying that quite a bit. And I'm gonna do the same thing all the way across. So once I've made the X's, then I come back and draw the line that connects them all. And so that gives me this visual of what that experience might be like for them. So then this is where the UDL pieces come in. So now I'm gonna think about for each of these steps, what are maybe some of the barriers that students might run into for that piece? And so for the first part, I'm thinking about that particular class is coming to my class right after lunch, so they're a little squirrely. And so I know that they're really high energy when they get to my class. And me just talking to them is probably not gonna be a real good fit for that class coming in right after recess. And I also make a note to myself, it's kind of a boring way to start this. Like maybe there's a better way I could think about starting this. So I'm trying to identify the barriers for each piece. And then I go over here to, let's pick a good one. We could do this dynamics one. So for the dynamics flashcards where they're sitting down and doing flashcards together, students may not be able to find a partner. I hate that when that happens, right? Like, there's some kids who just tend to not get picked. And I don't want that to happen because I don't want the student to feel like that. I'm also thinking about, well, do they actually know? I mean, I just told them about dynamic markings like right before this. Like, are they going to remember it well enough to just go off and now do work together about this? I'm not sure that they're quite ready for that. So that's a barrier I think that could be here. So that's all we're doing for that piece is just thinking through one step at a time. And then the last part is where we think about, okay, well, what can we do to remove the barriers that we've identified? And so we might be thinking about some of the things on the framework of UDL, but we also might just come up with some ideas ourselves. So the barrier for this first intro I was thinking was that it's kind of boring and I already know this class is pretty high energy. So maybe I can start with something like when they first get to my classroom that will help to focus their energy instead of like me just talking to them. So maybe we're doing a song with some hand signs or something that I know that they really like and that's gonna kind of focus their energy back to this one thing. So I just am trying to find ways I could remove the barriers along that whole piece. And I mean, it seems simple and it seems like, okay, right, but like, aren't you already thinking about this? And there's something very magical about putting it on paper that makes things pop out that you maybe hadn't thought about before. And I hear that from K-12 teachers, I hear that from my higher ed faculty as well, that something about this process makes things jump out that maybe would not have. So that's kind of how that works.
This is awesome.
So I don't know if you want to, well, I'm thinking about what you are doing currently, which would be teaching pre-service teachers. I'm wondering if it might be useful to walk through how I would use this in a setting where I'm teaching pre-service teachers.
Yes.
So I might give them an example of a lesson. Weird. Did you hear that?
Next door.
Oh, okay. Oh my God. So I might give them an example of a lesson. So this one is math, a middle school math class. And then I might, especially if these are special ed teachers or general class teachers taking a class about teaching special ed students.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find my other handout. Let's see. I have a whole list of student personas, and they're all based on students I taught. But they are not in this folder. Here they are. All right, so I got 5 different students on there. So what I might have them do, I might just assign them a student, or I might let them pick one of these. But you're going to choose one of these students, basically. And now you're going to think about, knowing what you know about this student, how is that student going to experience this lesson? And so instead of thinking about generally the whole class, which you still could do that if you want, but when I've got a certain student in mind and I'm thinking about how that might work for that student, this is a really helpful tool. And I think it opens a lot of students' eyes about like, oh, I haven't even thought about that. So do you want to, we can just talk one out if you want.
Yes.
All right, well, I'll let you pick a student. So again, these are all students I had in class. I just changed their names.
Let's go with Kamaya.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So did you have a minute to read through?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's think about for Kamaya. So we got, again, this is a math class. So they're coming in, they're just copying vocab words off the board into their notebook. The teacher's talking about the math problems and shows some examples on the board, and then students copy those examples. Then they're going to individually work on a couple problems by themselves. And while they're doing that, the teacher has two students come up and work theirs on the board instead of like at their spot. And then they're going to practice doing individual problems. They'll practice about 10 problems from a book or a workbook or whatever. Then they're going to trade their answers, trade them and grade them, as we say. So they trade their papers, grade each other's papers, and then the teacher's going to assign homework and give them whatever time they have left in the class to do that. This was every math class I ever took in middle school. Like, it was exactly this.
Wow.
So if we're thinking about this through Kamaya's lens as a student, there may be some issues along the way. So we can start by thinking, I guess, about the materials. So do you want to write on yours? I don't have a pen off right here, so if you want to write on yours, you can. And I've got plenty of extras since you're the only person here.
That work student, copy vocab words and definitions. So just add the materials here.
Yeah.
So I think the materials would be the vocab, word cards.
Yeah, that would be somewhere for them to copy them, I guess. So.
Their notepads or books. And the pen.
Okay. Let's just pick another one. We don't have to do them all. I mean, I think you kind of understand how this works, but let's pick one other one and add materials for that one. Anyone jump out at you?
Let's do this one. So the math problems.
And then we'll do 1, 3, and 5, just because why not?
Okay.
Just for funsies.
I think we'll put the board maybe.
Oh, sorry.
Interactive. And trade and grade. Students try to work with classmates. Answers on the board and completed papers. Maybe a pen or sticky notepads.
And the materials should be about the same because, I mean, the materials are the materials. But sometimes the barrier is in the materials, so that's why we add, or that's why we kind of put those on there. All right, well, so we'll do all of them for this one. Like, where do you feel like Kamaya specifically would be on this positive to negative line here for each of these pieces? So Maya is compliant but often zoned out, short attention span but not hyperactive, difficulty sitting, careless mistakes on quizzes, worksheets, and exams, above average cognitive ability,
Yeah,
fluent
I think
reader.
she's going to be extremely low starting here, possibly bored.
Mm-hmm.
Teacher explains math problems and shows examples on the board. Students copy the examples. I think she might still be bored here too.
Okay.
Zoning out, start.
Yeah, because really the
Probably
teacher's just been
earlier.
talking for the most part, yeah.
Students individually work, and she may be getting up a little bit here. Just some interest.
Yeah, at least she's doing something.
And here interest might fall again. So becoming bored. Trading the work, she might go up a little bit more with engagement. And assign homework. Students work on homework. She's definitely out right here.
And wrapped. Right. Okay, so now if you want to connect those, just so you can sort of see the arc of Kamaya's experience with this class.
Oh my gosh, she's on a horrible roller coaster for the lesson.
Oh no.
Just truly displaced, zoning out.
Okay, so let's do 1, 3, and 5 again, since we did these parts up here for the barriers. So for those parts, and you've mentioned a little bit as you kind of were thinking through where Kamaya might have been, but what are some barriers that you might see for that bell work piece for Kamaya?
I think a possible barrier would be just redundant work. I'm not sure if that would be considered. Look at that previous example.
I mean, copying vocab's pretty boring, so I get it.
So I would say boring work. Here, teacher explains math problems and shows some examples on the board. I probably would say boring again, or lack of choices. And this, it's probably low sustained engagement. And to practice the problem again, it's like repetitive.
Yeah. I mean, if I can do it 3 times, like how is doing it 10 times going to prove that I can actually do it better? Right.
And then she's a high performer too, so trade in the work. She may be an early finisher and finish before the others, and that could be a barrier.
I'm also thinking about this makes careless mistakes on quizzes, worksheets, and exams piece too. Like she might have done most of the things wrong, but made just one little thing, which made the whole
thing incorrect.
Right. That might be embarrassing even. And
So it could be like lack of review time.
And if she is a high performer, like having someone else see that you are not getting it.
Yes, can interfere, I would say, with like self-efficacy skills or just self-confidence.
True.
And homework, I think at this point she's just done. It's like, so I'd probably boring work.
All right. And often, like when I have seen this, like, okay, everybody's going to work on homework, it seems really unstructured. And then also, the teacher's helping individual students at his desk. So, like, for some students, that's really distracting. Like, this is very distracting right now for me to hear whatever's happening next door. So, I don't know. Okay. And then let's just do a couple of these ones for the
remove the
strategies we
barrier.
might use to remove some barriers. Yeah.
Let's see, the first one, students copy vocab words and definitions from the board. It possibly is an engagement issue. Let's see.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably designed with welcoming interests and identities.
I think you mentioned, and it might have been for that one, that like there's no choice here. Like this is this is what we're doing.
There was another one there with lack of choice.
Yeah,
number
that's where it was. There it
2.
was. So like if you were going to change this now with Kamaya in mind, what would you maybe change about the vocab part? Or the bell work, I guess.
I probably would use, let me see, design options for interaction. Probably action and expression. Design options for interaction. Let me
Okay.
see which one now. It's not necessarily an accessibility issue. So vary and honor the methods of response, navigation and movement, which could involve students either working on defining these terms or as opposed to just copying the vocab word, or making it more tangible to students
Right.
and more engaging.
Oh, what about, I forget what those are called. They have a name. It's like four squares, and one is like you draw a picture of this vocabulary word, and then one is, I can't remember what the other thing is, and then you list an example and you list a non-example. Oh, there's a name for it. I can't remember what it is. But it's
And
like,
if it is math, it could be like, at strategy, something similar to what you're saying, like build it, draw it, write it, kind of strategy that sort of engage students beyond just the definition, or are we giving them the definition and they come up with an example of it, or
okay, yeah.
something that requires some autonomy.
Well, because I also just saw that she struggles with handwriting. But if you're asking me, saying, well, you can also just draw an example of it.
And
like,
she's very creative.
right.
Doesn't like to read, but is a fluent reader. So I think if we give a little bit more around engagement, let me see. Yeah, I think, no, engagement, I probably would use engagement for 2. And then this one, I probably would use interaction. Design options for interaction, vary and honor the methods of response, navigation and movement. So it could include maybe a station rotation kind of thing where they're moving.
I like that.
So it's just not, they're either picking up a portion of the response,
Right.
picking up another portion there, but not just having all of it at once from the teacher.
I like that.
And I think for her being, compliant and zone out, so she may look like she's what we consider to be paying attention, but just not at all. And for the second one, I would do welcoming interests and identities,
Okay.
optimize choice and autonomy,
And like, what would that look like? Like, how would you offer choice for?
So for this one, where the teacher explains math problems and shows examples on the board, students could actually select their math problem or create their own math problem now that they sort of have an idea of the definitions. Maybe we could all pick 2 definitions from the class and then have students give an example of a math problem for each definition. And they're sort of like providing the choice where they're choosing the definition, and then giving them autonomy to come up with a problem, even if it's an incorrect problem, then it becomes a teachable moment because maybe
Right.
you're understanding now that they didn't really grasp the meaning, the definition of the term. So maybe.
Yeah, I think you get it, right? So like that's really just that's how you kind of think through this. And again, putting it on paper makes a whole thing. And the one thing I usually, when I use these student personas, one of the things I usually will tell people, excuse me, that is that when we're talking about UDL, I'm not only giving Kamaya those options, I'm giving everyone those options, because the truth is there's probably other students who are similar to Kamaya or for whatever reason get bored with whatever. And so that's how it's kind of different than providing accommodations or IEP accommodations or whatever, because you're building that into the class itself. So yes, I'm still meeting the needs of Kamaya, but I'm also meeting the needs of students who I maybe didn't even know needed that by building those things in. So
And then these wouldn't be considered as accommodations in that legal sense, where you're not able to provide legal accommodations to students without those documentation, but you're able to have that equitable access to, instruction.
That's right. Well, because there's so many students that like just are right under the level, right? But we know that they could still use those supports in some way. So yeah, that's how that works. Well, it's interesting that you chose Kamaya, because actually, I said these are all based on students I taught, which is sort of true. Kamaya is based on me. Like, this is me.
Yes.
Exactly me as a student.
These are the students that I tend to pay attention to, because compliance, the moment I see over compliant in a student, my brain goes to trauma.
Interesting.
Or it goes to something like just those learning differences. And I've been like a compliant student, and then I've been able to like say to myself, was I truly learning or just looking
just
compliant,
acting right.
just acting right? So I generally like go for those students who are not compliant, and those are the students you can see a little bit more of their true personalities and true self and stuff. But the ones who are compliant sometimes slip through the cracks, and because everybody thinks they're okay, they're not giving any trouble. They have a little handwriting problem, but they're good, they're okay. So I don't I pay extra attention to like my compliant learners, or those over compliant learners, or students who tend to like zone out just a little bit. So the moment I saw that, I was like, yes, because
there's a lot of students like that, for
and
sure.
the cognitive, exactly what they mentioned, cognitive are usually above average. And when we get these students at the college level, that's when they're walking out of classes and they're struggling, and they don't have those executive functioning skills because it hasn't been taught,
Well, and many of them are they're quick enough that they can come up with an answer, so it looks like they don't actually have an issue. But then when they get to college and they're being challenged, they are just beside them. You should see my GPA for my undergrad. It's not great. It's not great.
And
but here we are.
It's in alignment, and it makes perfect sense, because this is what happened to our students, and oftentimes those are the students who are sometimes twice gifted or thrice gifted, but it's just that this connection component, this design component, just that they're unable to articulate that there's an issue with the design. And because we have traditionally have a one-way road with assessment, where it's just a student being assessed, but universal design for learning, in my viewpoint, makes it a two-way road, where now the teacher's being assessed, even at least self-assessment. And as you're writing, like, there's a shift moving away from lesson plans, and I'm not sure what's going on, but a lot of my pre-service educators are saying, well, my mentor teacher says we don't do lesson plan anymore. But I'm trying to get my pre-service educators to understand how important lesson planning is and being grounded in it, because this is what it is, and this is another component that unpacks your lesson plan. I've never seen it unpacked in this way.
And for someone like myself who doesn't like to read or write, this doesn't feel like writing to me.
It's a graphic organizer.
It's a visual,
I love
right?
it.
So I would much rather fill something like this out than type up a lesson plan.
And this
Yeah.
part here, it addresses like behavior, student behavior, and it also addresses teacher affective behavior. Like, what is the design? What's lacking? What's the barrier in the design? Because sometimes teachers, I hate to say this, but I'm a teacher, so I can say, we often don't like to have the issue turned on us to say that we are part of the problem, and that is why like all those examples that you provide are so relevant, because teachers, we generally say the students, yep, it's all on the students, all on the students. But having tools such as this really allow us to improve our practice in a very mindful way, and to
Agreed.
go beyond just, content and instruction, but to look at those part of it, like, is it really meeting the need? Is my lesson or my lesson activity meeting the need? So this is awesome.
Oh, good. I'm glad it was helpful. Hopefully it will be useful. The only other activity we're going to do, and we don't have to do this now, but I think is also helpful. This is actually in the book too, but I just printed it out. I often have teachers start with thinking about the physical classroom space first. And let me go find my slide that is about this so I can show you an example.
Yes.
And this could be something that that teachers, pre-service teachers could do after an observation maybe, or like if they have been out into a classroom. Okay, so this was my classroom. So I taught arts and humanities.
Love it.
So for this activity, that activity, I was having them think about, like, are there places in the actual physical classroom that seem to be problem areas? And so by, like, color coding this and labeling this and figuring out the things, I found that I had sort of the same flight pattern, I call it, because I could really quickly go around and be able to see everybody's work here. But what I started to notice is that these students that were out here on the edge were either being disruptive or were not on whatever that they were doing. And if I hadn't laid this out, I don't think I would have seen that. It also helped me to find places that seemed like there were bottlenecks or high traffic areas. And then kind of considering what that is there some other way I could organize it? So it's kind of, you're doing this, but you're doing it for the physical space instead of the instruction piece. So that's what this whole thing is. It just sort of walks you through how you might do something like this.
Yes.
And then there's, so that's the first page. So then the back page would be something that I would have a teacher do in their classroom later, of like, okay, now go sit in a desk for a minute and like think about your senses. So that's what this whole piece is about. Like, what do you hear? What do you smell? Like, what does it feel like to sit in this hard wooden chair or whatever? Because we don't often sit actually from the student perspective in our classroom and see. And so because my school was a school for students with learning disabilities, we were very cognizant about where we put like displays or things on the wall. And so if I knew that this is where my screen is and this is where I'm going to be standing, I would have almost nothing else on this wall except for that one thing, because anything else could be a potential distraction. But you often don't think about that until you're sitting in the student's spot. So I think it's a helpful activity for folks to think about the physical part of their classroom as well.
Awesome. I do, and I run a course called Classroom Management for all learners. And we have something similar, classroom audit.
Oh,
and one of the assignments that we do is to really develop a classroom management plan, just to have an understanding of it, and it includes exploring classroom design as well. And oftentimes, like, the misconception that I ran into was the belief that classroom management means managing students' bodies. And I often tell my teachers that I work with, in Memphis, the in-service teachers as well as my pre-service teachers know that no, classroom management begins when the classroom is empty. When you're able to walk in that classroom and you're able to look, to audit your classroom to see if it is a print-rich or is it overly print-rich?
Right.
Are there, lack of usable space in the classroom? Are there safe spaces in the classroom, and exactly the way you have it and your labels right there is, perfect. Where you're looking at areas of distraction, and how do we design our classroom to
Right.
minimize those areas, and those high traffic areas, and the areas near the doors as well, and who's passing and
That's
who's
right.
coming in.
That's right.
This is awesome.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's what we were
Oh
going to
my
do, just with a
goodness.
lot more people.
I need
I'm
you
so-
at
I'm
Berea
so glad
College.
that you were here.
I
This is great.
absolutely need you at Berea College. Yeah, I told Jason as I was outside that this will be my next session coming into. So thank you so
Why
very
not?
much.
And you should have all the materials on the Google site. Let me grab it.
That